Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We don't have any housekeeping issues other than if you have questions, please unmute yourself and pipe up or type in the chat and we'll get them from the chat. But it is so great to see everyone, even though it's just virtually through cameras. Our first hot topic today is just a follow up on the 1099 processing. The forms 1099 MIS and 1099 NEC. When I was doing the 1099s, I noticed it was a mixed bag on who reported their attorneys as 1099 MIS and who reported their attorneys as 1099 NEC. So I just wanted to go over very briefly the 1099 MIS are payments to an attorney for gross proceeds. So this is if you had an award and you paid the attorney from the award, you would report that on a 1099 MIS. But if you're only paying the attorney for fees for services, that is to go on the 1099 NEC. And so there's links to the IRS instructions for both forms 1099 MIS and 1099 NEC. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, the EMIS update. The 5-year forecast mandatory resubmission window, your PDF that Carrie sent out was wrong because that was my error. When I reread this morning, I realized I just said by May 31st. Well, the window doesn't open until April 1st. So the mandatory resubmission window is April 1 through May 31. And no, it's no fool. They will open it on April 1. And sometime during that 2-month period, you will need to do your mandatory resubmission of the 5-year forecast. And I will send out the load instructions again so that you have those current. The FY21 student collection, the mid-year student collection closes on April 30, and then the end-of-year collection reopens, and it is scheduled to close on July 14th. Pending the legislation that just went to the Senate or the House, one of them yesterday, and is an emergency measure that will probably go to the governor to be signed very soon to make provisions on the assessments so that they can use the grades in lieu of assessments for this year's juniors and seniors, and also extend the grade card, the local report card date, the end of year collection close date for student collection may possibly be extended again this year like it was last year. Hopefully not as long, but it may possibly be extended pending legislation. The staff reporting, the final staff collection window is open. All of the local report card statistics, except for the attendance and absence percentage, attendance percentage, is taken from the first collection. However, if there are errors that need to be corrected, even though it won't change the statistics, those corrections should be made. And then verify all of your data is accurate for the current year. I know your EMIS coordinators are working on all of this. We just had an EMIS Alliance Career Tech report training yesterday, and the Career Tech reports are generated out of the staff course collection. The College Credit Plus and tuition reports are available in the data collector under reports, level 2 reports, and those are mostly under the S collection, I believe, but you can do a filter for CCP or tuition to get those particular reports. Also, if you build tuition for per diem tuition, those reports are available under the reports received files, and they're sent out periodically, only for those districts who did any billing. Are there any questions about the EMIS update? Okay, thank you.
Okay, next, just a quick update on our current fiscal projects. So for RAM, we have had a bug for a while if your users are deleting a line item from a requisition where RAM doesn't notice that that line has been deleted. So you have to contact LACA and we can repush that requisition into RAM to be resubmitted showing those updates. But Chad looked into the import process recently as he was troubleshooting that with another ITC, and he was able to change the programming on the back end of the redesign import to resolve that issue with redesign districts. It still remains in Classic, just how that information pulls out of Classic. It's handled slightly differently. But if you're a redesign district, you should no longer have that issue, which I know it wasn't that common that somebody would go in and delete a line. But if that was occurring, that's fixed in the redesign. So in the long run, future looking forward, that bug will disappear for us. So that's a good thing. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about RAM? On the kiosk, again, the timesheet module is ready. If a district wants to test that and take a look at that, we can meet with you about that and see if that's something that you would like to pursue. We do not yet have a LACA district using that, so we don't have a lot of experience with it, but we would gladly learn that alongside of you and help you use that if that is something you are interested in. And then this time of year, we usually ask you to clean up your active users in kiosk. Typically, the management council bills ITCs based on a count that they pull in the spring. So they usually pull that sometime in April. We haven't been given a date this year of when they will pull those active user counts, but we just ask that you go in regularly, review your active users, and inactivate any who should no longer have access. So you can, in kiosk, it actually, I think it is like a delete button, or it's telling you that you're deleting the user, but it's really just inactivating that user so they can no longer log in. And if somebody needs to get in after you've done that, you can expand all of your deleted users, find that deleted user, reactivate them, set a new password. No data is lost. So it's not like it's an unreversible thing. But if you don't think they should have access at this point in time going forward, then please clean them up and activate them. And, you can revisit that if you need to, if that person comes back to your district for any reason or needs to get in and look at something. So if you could do that, we would appreciate it. Are there any other questions about kiosk or issues right now that you guys have heard of? For eFinance Plus, round 10 is in the works right now. Those districts are training and working to go live this coming July 1st, but we do not have any LACA districts in that wave. We also wanted to let everybody know that the round 11 sign-up deadline is April 23rd. We have not heard of any LACA districts considering that round, but if you are, please let us know. And that would be planning to train and work to convert in the fall and go live by next January 1st. As far as we know, though, the rest of our districts who are on Classic are planning to migrate to the redesign. So we have the 3 districts, Licking Heights, Granville, and Heath, who are already live, and we are not aware at this point in time of any other LACA districts pursuing that at this time. And I don't think we have anybody represented from Heath, Granville, or Licking Heights on the call today. This slide was really just a reminder for them because I've been working with them recently to get all of their eFinance Plus access set up in LAMA, just so that it's out there with the rest of their software access that they're requesting. And I was just going to remind them that that's all out there now, that they can submit any changes through LAMA. But I don't think we have anybody joining us from those districts today. So does anybody else have any questions about eFinance Plus?
All right, I can pick up next. So I'll be giving a redesign update. First, updating you on statewide redesign conversions. As of last October's meeting, 283 sites were live on redesign, 146 were included in Wave 6, with 368 total districts participating. As of this week's SSDT newsletter, 381 sites are now live on redesign. 198 are included in the current Wave 7. 537 total districts are participating. Our current Wave 7 LACA districts are Johnstown and Lakewood, who are currently doing parallel data entry and are hoping to go live by the beginning of April. Lancaster and West Muskingum will be beginning their parallels in April and are planning to go live in early May. Do any of these districts have any comments on how things are going so far? All right. Our next Wave 8 districts will be having a planning meeting on May 6th. We'll basically be gathering some data from those districts so we can begin our preparation and also provide some information to the Management Council so they can compile their Wave 8 statistics. We'll also begin discussing with those Wave 8 districts what they can do to clean up their classic data and prepare for their conversions. Likely in maybe July, we'll be doing a kickoff meeting, which will explain more of the conversion process and when those districts can begin contacting their third-party vendors for their conversions. We will have a redesign training likely in August, and districts will begin their parallels either in September or October so that they can be live in redesign by early November. Next, this next slide shows the current and remaining wave schedule. Districts not included through Wave 7 should have recently received a message from ODE about Classic's sunset. We realized that that this schedule was set a while ago, so some of you may have concerns about your placement, in a particular wave. If anyone is interested in switching waves with another district, that could still be done. We just want to keep each wave balanced so that we don't overload any particular wave. Does anybody have any concerns with which wave they're in currently or any other concerns regarding redesign conversions at this time? Okay. If you do have any concerns and think about something after the meeting, you can email us and we can we can try to look into, you know, finding, you know, someone to maybe trade spots with. So keep that in mind as you think about your redesign conversions. So upcoming redesign software additions are scheduled for later this year, include equipment inventory, which is scheduled for an August release. We'll likely schedule a equipment inventory redesign training once we're able to see what it looks like and how it works. Also, there are workflows coming to redesign, which are scheduled for September. Initial workflows could include requisitions, budget transfers, and employee onboarding. We'll schedule a training for that also after we have a better understanding of how it works in redesign. Other future projects include that the SSDT are working on to incorporate into redesign are document management and archiving. This basically includes uploading or organizing documents in redesign. Also, they're looking into expanded printing capabilities, such as printing checks or other documents that currently may require third-party software. And then they're also looking to expand the HR functionality in redesign as well. At this time, does anybody have any questions or they would like to ask us or each other?
Hey, Jake, this is Jolene. For HR functionality, what does that involve?
Carrie actually has been involved in some meetings on that. Carrie, do you have any expanded explanation for that?
They actually haven't started production on that. That last slide that Jake was talking about, he did mention those are future projects. So they're still like deciding what that will entirely entail. But the actual description that they've really just given it right now is just a more full-featured HR functionality. So I guess I would almost envision like maybe some employee onboarding pieces. Like they keep saying HR instead of payroll, so that's why I'm leaning more towards that way, but they really have not been specific yet, unfortunately. They're still focused on the equipment inventory and the workflows piece, and they just have those three large items, the document management and the printing capabilities and the HR functionality as their next big features based on feedback from districts and ITCs. And then they will probably have meetings with districts and ITCs to try to collect kind of what you guys would like to see and incorporate that as they develop it. So if you have thoughts, like if you currently use a third party vendor for something and you would like to see that in the redesign, or you currently do something a lot on paper, like if you have ideas, we can definitely collect those and forward those along.
Good question.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody have anything else? All right. The next slide kind of it lists some upcoming meetings. I'm not going to read all of them, but I did want to point out that next Tuesday we have a redesign reports training. Anyone needing a refresher on running reports and redesign is free to, can attend. May 6th is our Wave 8 planning meeting. And June 3rd is our next fiscal advisory meeting. I believe all of these meetings are listed on our website, and you can sign up there. The next slide is a listing of our proposed future fiscal advisory meetings. Currently, the September meeting is going to be combined with the governing board. There's a listing there for October 21st, unless at retreat, which I'll speak at it in a moment. And then the calendar year end meeting is tentatively scheduled for either December 2nd or the 9th. So backing up to the October 21st date, it mentions the possible retreat. Since we no longer have like a chair, do we have any, do we want to have a discussion on if a retreat is something that we want to do this year? Or do we have any volunteers that would like to maybe begin a committee on organizing a retreat?
This is Julie. I mean, I don't mind being on a committee. I know we had talked about maybe starting something in Lancaster next year. So I guess it's this year now. So if that's something people are interested in, I don't mind kicking it off.
Thank you. Would anybody else maybe want to be involved with that, or maybe that's something we can discuss behind the scenes as well. So. Okay, next Carrie's going to discuss what we can do to start preparing for a fiscal year end.
Okay, these next few slides, we're kind of going to bounce back and forth between Classic and Redesign. So we're going to talk about one concept, how you can do that in Classic and how you can do that in Redesign. So at this point in time in the year, you can start preparing for fiscal year end. And one of the things that you can do with that is update your building and central office information. In Classic, that is on the USA EMS DB menu. You can update your central office square footage and ITC IRN in the district maintenance option. You can enter your transportation and lunchroom percentages in the building maintenance option. And those transportation percentages are the total number of students bused for a specific building divided by the total number of students bused in the entire district. And similarly for lunchroom, it's the total number of meals served in that building divided by the total number of meals served in the district. So that's how you calculate those percentages. And then you can enter those in the building maintenance screen. You can also update your square footage there for those buildings if those have changed. And there is the option 3 on the menu building report that should be helpful as you need to verify the information that you entered, or if you want to review what's already there to see if you need to make any updates. Similarly, in Redesign, you can update your central office square footage and your ITC IRN in the organization option of the core menu. And your lunchroom and transportation percentages are updated on the periodic menu in the building profiles option. So they're calculated the same. This is just the screen that you go to enter that information or update what's there from last year.
And just a reminder that if any of you added or changed any buildings this year, then those possibly square footages would need to be updated.
You can go ahead and validate your accounts right now. In Classic, you would run the VALAC program, and review the invalid accounts. If you have warnings, those can be ignored, but fatals have to be fixed. And if you need to make corrections, you can use the account change program. When you use the account change program, remember that nobody else can be in the files. So if you are submitting that in batch, we recommend that you submit that before our backups and stuff start nightly. So, maybe like 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., somewhere in that window, but before 8 p.m. so that your account change doesn't conflict with other processes that run overnight. Because your account change will fail, our processes will go ahead and run and make your account change fail. So if you have any questions about VALAC, let us know. There is also a document on the website that has some common messages that you may see on that and what those messages mean to help you interpret those. And if you have warnings that you're seeing about function and object code pairings that require an OPU, you may also find the EMIS manual section 6.3 helpful in determining which accounts require those OPUs or subjects and instructional levels. So, but if you have any specific questions about that, let us know. And in the redesign, the same report is available on the report menu. If you select the report manager, the SSDT account validation report will go ahead and give you a listing of report or accounts that are invalid. And then to fix any of those accounts in the redesign, you also have an account change program on the utilities menu that you can run. You can also at this point in time review your EMIS fund categories. And in Classic, you can run the EMIS fund category report to see the cash accounts that have an EMIS fund category. If you see an asterisk, it means an EMIS fund category is required. So go ahead and see if you have an EMIS fund category that you can select. If all of the available options are not applicable, though, the asterisk is acceptable as long as no other code is applicable. You just don't want to have a blank there if it's required. And you also would see warnings on your VALAC report of invalid fund categories. So if you have corrections that you need to make to those EMIS fund categories in Classic, you would do that in Reflections in Account Screen on Screen 2. You can use your F7 to pull up a list of available EMIS fund categories and make your selection. Or if you prefer to work in USS Web, you can update the account and you have a drop down there to select the desired EMIS fund category. And section 6.2 of the EMIS manual would give you a listing of available EMIS fund categories as well, if you need a list to review and find more information on. In Redesign, to verify your existing EMIS fund categories, you can go to Core Accounts, and on the Cache tab, you can add a couple columns to your grid using the More button. So you're going to add the EMIS fund category if that's not there already. And then in the filter row, you're going to filter on not blank, not a space. So do your less than, greater than, and a space. And that will display all accounts that currently contain an EMIS fund category on them, and you can review those and see if there are any changes that need to be made. And I apologize for the typo on the next bullet point, but we also recommend from this cache tab that you generate a report of all cache accounts with no filters and scroll down that list of EMIS fund categories to see if there are EMIS fund categories that need to be filled in. So the first option is really to review the existing EMIS fund categories, and then the second option is to look for those blank EMIS fund categories that you might have to fill in. That maybe you added a new cache account this year and you haven't assigned the EMIS fund category yet. So if you have any corrections, you can do that right there by editing the cache account from the grid. And again, one thing I didn't mention on the last slide, but the same as with classic EMIS, the EMIS manual section 6.2 might be helpful as you're looking for those EMIS fund categories. So next you can verify your operational units. You can do that in Classic, either in USAS Web or in Reflections, and verify that you have the correct IRN assigned to each OPU, verify your entity type, and if you have an OPU of all zeros, you have to assign the district IRN to that OPU. So make sure that that's accurate. If you closed any buildings this year, we recommend that you change the IRN to the district IRN if there are expenditures in that building this year, since that IRN that would have been assigned to it would now be considered closed when reported to EMIS. So if you had any like carryover expenditures that you had to wrap up in this year on a closed building, change that to the district IRN. In the redesign, there is a report in the report manager called the SSTT OPU listing that you can use to review your OPU information, and then you can make corrections in the OPU option of the core menu. So again, verify your IRN numbers and your entity types and make sure those are correct for the current year. And make sure all OPUs have an IRN assigned to them. So especially if this is your first fiscal year end on redesign, go to all these screens, verify everything, make sure everything imported correctly. And if you've been through a fiscal year end on the redesign already, just make sure everything is still correct this year as it carried over from last year. You know, make sure nothing has changed that needs to be updated. You can also start entering your next year proposed amounts. And in Classic, there are a couple ways that you can do that. You can run your bud work or rev work, enter the new figures in those spreadsheets, and then use the NYP load option of a prop to import that information. We do have a document on the web page that is a little bit more detailed on that process to walk you through that. If you would prefer, you can also start by pulling information out using Safari and then updating the information in those spreadsheets. And if you do that, then you would load your information into the account load option of the USA load menu. Or you can manually enter information, or maybe you've already done a lot of the work through a bud work or rev work and NYP load, and you just have a few updates to make. You can make those few updates directly in account screen and reflections or in the account option of USAS Web. So in redesign, we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. In a little bit, we're going to actually hop into the redesign and do a live demo on updating budget information, since that's new for a lot of you. But just so you have an idea, there are equivalent reports available in the redesign that you would have been used to using in Classic. So those are listed here for you. And then there are also 2 good reports that are available in the manual, which I'll show you a little bit later with the demo, that are formatted perfectly for the redesign in order to update into the redesign. So again, we'll look at those a little bit more closely with the demo here in a little bit. But in the manual, there's, in addition to these 3 that are available in the report manager, there's a budget spreadsheet and a revenue spreadsheet that I really think you'll find helpful. But a basic overview of the budgeting process in the redesign is that you're going to create your budget or revenue scenarios. There's a scenarios option on the budgeting menu, and it kind of is like working with a spreadsheet directly in the software, or you can download that to a spreadsheet, make the changes in Excel, and then upload the information back in. Or you can start with one of those reports from the prior slide or from the manual and update the information and load it into the scenarios area of the software. And then once you have that information in the scenarios area, you are going to be able to promote it to the proposed amounts grid. go to the proposed amounts grid, review the information, make any changes that you need to make. And then from there, when everything's ready, you're going to apply that information to the budget accounts. So while it's sitting in the proposed amounts grid, that's going to allow you to see the next year proposed amounts on the individual accounts, if you like seeing that information on the individual accounts. And then when you're ready to apply, you just, go to that proposed amount grid and select the fiscal year, the new fiscal year, and click apply. So we're going to hop into the software and look at this actually live in a minute so that it hopefully makes more sense. But I do think it will be very helpful for you to click either of these links that we have available for you in the PowerPoint. And there are step-by-step instructions for entering those next year proposed amounts through these menu options and entering current year adjustments using these menu options. So after you enter your next year proposed amounts in Classic, you have a couple reports that are available to you. Those are listed here where you can verify your information. And similarly in Redesign, you have reports available in the Report Manager. And then you also have some reports available in the Shared Reports Library, which hopefully our redesign districts are using that Shared Reports Library. Remember, that's an option up there under the Help menu to the top right after you're in the software, where you can go out to a public shared reports library that maybe SSDT has put reports out there, other districts have put reports out there that people have found to be helpful to fill in a couple gaps with the software or to just enhance current existing reports in the software even further. Another thing that your secretaries are going to start asking you about, I'm sure, are when can we start entering our future requisitions? And whenever you allow that, they can go ahead and enter future requisitions by entering a future date on that requisition. This slide applies to both Classic and Redesign. If your district is using RAM, when those future requisitions import into RAM, they will be flagged in red to hopefully catch your eye that this is a future year request. Then the next slide is specific to Classic. As your secretaries are keying those requisitions, they want to use an FY22 date for the requested PO date that they enter on that requisition. And that will allow it then to be converted to a future PO by your office. And if in USAS.USACon, the option called check future year balances is yes, then when your secretaries go to enter these requisitions, you have to have your next year proposed amounts already entered in order for those future requisitions to not have warnings and error messages, or if you're converting future requisitions to purchase orders to not get those error messages. So if you have that flag set that way right now and your secretaries are running into issues, let us know and we can switch that flag if that's what you prefer at this point in time. Or if you have to hurry up and get your next year proposed amounts in, you can go ahead and do that if you prefer that option. In Redesign, they're going to enter an FY22 date for the requisition date. So in Classic, there was a field called requested PO date. In Redesign, it's just the actual requisition date that needs to be in the next fiscal year in order to be a future year requisition. And if your secretaries are doing this now, then if they're keying July requisitions or August requisitions, you actually have to have the month of July or the month of August open. So this might be new to you. So if you typically let secretaries enter future year requisitions now before they leave for the year, you would have to go to core posting period and open those months to allow them to key those future dated transactions. You don't have to change your current period. The current period is what displays in the top right of the screen, and that's what drives your month-to-date figures on your reports and your month-to-date figures on your accounts. You just have to have that other posting period open to allow that transaction to be saved.
Gary, this is Lottie. I have a question.
Okay.
If, for example, let's say we're in June and a secretary wants to do requisitions that are an August date, I have to have July open and August, correct?
That is correct. It won't let you skip months. So like if they want to key a July requisition today, you would have to open April, May, June, and July in order for them to do that. That is correct.
Thank you.
Good question.
Carrie, this is Kelly. I have a question on that. If we would open, because we let them start now, putting future purchase orders in as soon as we stop the supply budget for this year. So if we would open July right now and just leave it open so they can post it whenever they want, is that going to hurt anything?
It really just allows any transaction to be posted in that month. So that's the only thing to keep in mind. I mean, if you would key a date wrong, I mean, in theory, you could key a future dated purchase order also, or you could key a future dated check also. I mean, I hope that wouldn't happen, but I guess that's my only caution. There's really nothing else that would hurt by having those months open. It just allows transactions to be keyed into them. As long as you're not changing your current,
I think.
yeah, as long as you're not changing your current period, it's not going to change your reports or anything.
Okay. I think SC View, because we use SC View, will hold them too. So we can always wait until they're being actually converted. Just
Okay.
hold them all and not convert them until one time and then open it up. So we could do that also.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and just like in Classic, how Classic had that flag in USAS.USACon that could control warnings that you're seeing on future requisitions and error messages on future requisitions, there are some rules available in redesign to control those, warning messages or error messages. So if somebody tries to key a requisition and they're seeing warning messages or error messages and you think they should not be, or they're keying those and you think they should be, we have to revisit that rules document and see if you have a rule that you want to change. So those rules were one of those ones on that list that you guys were allowed to control what they were doing when entering a future requisition or a future purchase order. So we just want to make sure those are set accurately how you want them at this point in time in the year. So if you have any questions about that, how your rules are set, feel free to let us know. Or if you think you want to change those, we just need something in writing from the treasurer so that we can flip those rules to do what you want. So once you have those future requisitions, if you want to convert them to future purchase orders, in Classic, you would run mass convert using the requested PO date. And those would then be future purchase orders that once you are in the month of July, you will have to run auto post to convert those future purchase orders to actual open purchase orders. That step's forgotten a lot just because we don't work with future purchase orders a lot throughout the year. So just if you are converting requisitions to purchase orders now with the next fiscal year date on that PO, jot yourself a little note down that you're going to have to run auto post to make those purchase orders invoiceable when you get into the new fiscal year. In redesign, you can convert those future requisitions to purchase orders from the requisition grid, just like any other requisition conversion. You can leave the purchase order date blank when that screen pops up and asks you for the purchase order date to post those future purchase orders using the requisition date, or you can hand key a date in. But if you leave that blank, it's going to pick up whatever requisition date the secretary entered and use that as the PO date. And you actually don't have the auto post step like was required in Classic, because redesign, those purchase orders will just be available and they will start showing as encumbrances on your reports once you get into the new fiscal year. Then one final thing that you can kind of work ahead on right now, you can work on some of those EMIS data entry options, specifically civil proceedings, because you probably know a lot of that information now. And in Classic, you're going to do that on the USA EMS EDT menu option for civil proceedings. And in redesign, that is on the periodic menu, the civil proceeding option. So you see those, all of those same USA EMS EDT options highlighted here, the cash rec, the federal assistance summary and detail, and the civil proceedings. The menu, I just am going to point out, it's alphabetical. It's in no like order related to processing. It's just alphabetical. So, that might help make some sense of that, but any questions on things you can start doing now to prepare for fiscal year end? Okay, so the last item on the agenda today is a demo in the redesign of the budgeting options. So, I really hope all of the districts who are redesign districts who are either live on redesign or implementing redesign, I would hope you'll stay on. And anybody else who wants to stay on to see this, I don't think it'll be a super long demo, but especially if you're going to be converting very soon from Classic to redesign, it might not hurt for you to see this. We also have a recording available on the LACA website of a budgeting training from last spring that goes and explains the options in the software using a PowerPoint, a lot of good information in that training. But today I was going to hop into a demo database and actually show you some of those options live. And as I demo, by the time I'm done, I hope you will be able to say that you've seen all of these options. You've created a budget scenario for your next year proposed amounts. You know how to upload a spreadsheet with those next year proposed amounts. You know how to clone a scenario. You can promote a scenario into proposed amounts and then apply that proposed amount as either initial budget or current year adjustments. And then we will, the next items kind of similar, but enter current year fiscal adjustments using scenarios. So as we do the demo, we'll see some of these reports. We won't look at them all, but just keep in mind that there are a lot of reports available in the redesign to help you with this budgeting process. So some of those are listed here just to remind you about those. And then we also want to remind you, and I'll show you the periodic menu, but we won't run all of these reports. But there are a couple other reports or programs that might be helpful to you over the next couple months. And we want to make sure you know where those are. You have like your appropriation resolution report on the periodic menu. You have your certification reports. So in Classic, I think that was like your AMD cert and your cert bow. And, you have your federal assistance detail and summary, you have your 5-year forecast, you have your spending plan. So this periodic menu may be something that you haven't looked at yet, especially if you've just implemented recently. But we're coming up on the point in time in the year where these options are probably going to start being very pertinent. So let me go ahead and exit out of the PowerPoint and log into a demo database of the redesign. And I believe I mentioned, because I think we had them as links in the PowerPoint, some step-by-step instruction documents that are available in the manual. So first I'll show you where you can find those. They are links in the PowerPoint, but if you go to Help Documentation and go into the USSR manual, we would like to look at the appendix and the useful procedures. And these first 2 links that are here, budgeting scenario steps for creating proposed amounts for next fiscal year, and budgeting scenario steps for making budget adjustments in the current fiscal year. I'm going to pretty much follow along with these today. So this is kind of like the step-by-step how I create a scenario, whether I'm creating from inside the software, uploading another spreadsheet, or there's the uploading another spreadsheet. And then once I have my scenario ready, how I promote that to the proposed amounts grid, and then what I can do in the proposed amounts grid, including applying those amounts to my accounts. So there's a lot of good information in this page. So I hope you will take a look at this, especially the first time you go through this. I really think it is basically like a step-by-step checklist. The other thing that's helpful on this page are those 2 reports that I said that are in the manual that I think you will really like. The budget spreadsheet and the revenue spreadsheet, which are formatted to upload into the budgeting scenarios option, like with very, very little intervention from you. So if you were to click these links in the manual, it's not going to show you a spreadsheet. It's actually a JSON file, which is a report file. So if I download these, so now it's in my downloads. And then if I were to go back into my redesign database and go into the report manager, I would import those reports into my report manager, and then I wouldn't have to do that again in future years. They're just going to be here. So I'm going to click the import button at the top left of my report manager grid and go find my downloads. And here's that budget worksheet that I just downloaded from the manual. And I'm just going to select it and click open. It's going to ask me what I want to name it, so I can change it to something else. I can put a tag on it that this is, Carrie, this is kind of like my bud work in a way. This is next year proposed. I can do whatever, whatever I want for a tag here. And maybe I should separate like multiple tags by commas, but, and then click save. And then that new budget worksheet is available in my report manager going forward. And here are those tags that I can come in here and say, I'm working on my next year proposed. What was that report that I need again? Oh, okay, there it is from last year. So if I remove my filters, I would do the same thing with the revenues. I would just click import report, select that revenues from my download, and then I'd have them both in here. But you can see I also have these already in here from when I worked with this before. I have the budget worksheet from the manual and the revenue worksheet from the manual. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that duplicate, but this is the same thing that I just downloaded. So I do think that will be helpful for you. And to show you that, I can just generate it now like any other report. It's programmed to generate an Excel file, and I can enter any query options that I want. So like here, it's remembering what I entered last time. I ran this for like a student activity account. If I generate that report, it's going to pop up with an Excel file for those accounts that meet my filter. And this is like formatted and ready to upload. So it's pulling out, here's my account information. You guys are seeing the spreadsheet on your screen, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes.
thank you. So there's my account information, my current fiscal year to date appropriated, prior year encumbrance, my fiscal year to date expendable, fiscal year to date expended. Here's this weird PA column that we're going to talk about. Prior year expended, 2 years prior year expended, and 3 years prior expended. So I said this file is formatted and just about ready to upload. So this PA stands for proposed amounts. So if I were wanting to, create this budget worksheet for all of my buildings, and I run all the filters and have every building's spreadsheet separate, this proposed amount, right now we're in FY21, so we'll be working on FY22 information. I need to change that PO header to contain the year. Whatever year this proposed amount is going to be for. Is this proposed amount for current year? Adjustments? If so, it's a PA-2021. But if this is for next year proposed, I need it to be a proposed amount for next year, so PA-2022. So that's the only header you guys have to change. And then you could come in here and enter your proposed amounts. If you know what they're going to be, key them, or if you, use a formula, you can do that and copy that stuff down. However you want to update this information. So then you would save this, send it to your advisors. Maybe they fill in those amounts and send it back to you. So I'll go ahead and save this file. So we ran a report from the report manager that we downloaded from the manual. We changed one header and we entered some proposed amounts for next year. I know I ran it on very limited accounts, but just so you can see what's going on here. I saved that. And now that is uploadable and ready if you want to upload into the budgeting area. So whether or not you did that step, kind of the first step, like you may have already done that step, or you may start with that step that I just show you, but you also could start right here at budgeting scenarios. And we're going to create a scenario. And when we create a scenario, we can upload that spreadsheet that we just created as part of our scenario. So I wanted to let you see kind of how I'm creating that spreadsheet and how it's all available to you. Then I'll upload it, but I'll also show you a couple other ways to add information to scenarios. But you can see what other scenarios I have out here in my demo database. Those will just stay out here. I have, promoted these already, but they're out here. And the nice thing is that since they're still out here, like if this were my next year proposed, I could view it and I could clone it. And it would, pull in all of the accounts and sheets that I had in here before. And I would have a very good starting point, and I could just update my next year proposed actual figures in that one column, and I'd be ready to go. So these are only going to disappear from this grid if you actually delete them. Just because I've promoted a scenario and used it, it doesn't mean it's gone from here. It's still available for me to see and clone, or do whatever else I need to do with it. But we will go ahead and create a new scenario. So we'll do our FY22. And you can put whatever description in here. I don't know if you are doing any sort of like standard increase based off of, current year expendable or anything. You could put whatever description you want. Maybe this, I just want to say. So this is going to be for both budget accounts and revenue accounts. And I'm going to do like a 2% increase, let's just say, over the current year. And so I've filled out a name for my scenario, a description, and what fiscal year it's going to pertain to. Right now I'm in FY21, so this is going to be my next year proposed for FY22. I'm going to go ahead and save. Okay, but it says I've already named one FY22, which I did. So let's say a different name. Okay, so I can then edit this scenario and start building those sheets. You don't have to save right there, but I do just so that I have like a good saved shell, because I, for some reason, forget to save a lot of times. So I save probably too often. But the first thing to start building details in this scenario, I'm going to click create or upload. So if we are working from that spreadsheet that I created just a few minutes ago, I'm going to do the upload option. And then I think that was for athletics. So I'm going to do a sheet name. This is going to be my athletics. You can do any description that you want. You choose your file and find that Excel spreadsheet that we just updated with our proposed amounts and click start upload. I get a successful message, and then here's that budget worksheet available. So if I want to see that budget worksheet in Excel, you can click this download button. And it's going to look exactly the same as what we just saw, because it's just what I uploaded. Here's those athletic accounts and all of those amounts that pulled in for reference or use based on formulas, and that proposed amount FY22 column with the amounts that, 2 of them I typed in, 2 of them I used formula. So you could make changes to the spreadsheet now and say, that actually, let's just clean that up and make them a little bit more round numbers. I could resave that spreadsheet. And then I could upload it back in. It's giving me a warning that this will overwrite the existing sheet. Okay, because I just made changes to it. And go find that sheet that I called updated and click start upload, successful message. Now the new amounts are in there. If I were to download, I would see that the download now contains those more rounded amounts. If you didn't want to download and upload the spreadsheet over and over again, you can use this edit button. It kind of looks like Excel when you open it in here, and you can make modifications directly in here without having to download and upload. So I could change that yet again and hit accept to save. So then if I were to look at that again, it's going to show that 5,500 that I changed, or if I downloaded it again, it updated it so that the spreadsheet now shows the new 5,500. So you would continue uploading any sheets that you had, any spreadsheets that you had updated from the outside. You would continue clicking upload and upload that spreadsheet and get it here. If you have everything perfectly the way you want it outside on your computer, just in spreadsheets. You never have to go through this, download, edit, upload, or the edit option. You can just upload a bunch of spreadsheets and have your entire scenario with multiple spreadsheets, from the multiple departments that you worked with to get those sheets populated. If you don't want to work from spreadsheets, you can use this create option. So we'll look at that next. Do you have any questions so far with what I talked about, like the upload option or where I started to get that file? And I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do things. You don't have to do it all three, like all the ways that I show you, but if you would prefer to create, when you click create, it's creating a new budgeting sheet. This drop down at the top left tells you whether it's a budget or a revenue sheet that you're working with. And all of these properties on the left are available for you to get into your spreadsheet. These ones that are displaying in the middle here are the ones that are already going to be in your spreadsheet just by default, which we saw that spreadsheet. It had, the account information and the account description and the prior year expendable and all that stuff. So this stuff looks like what those columns were in that spreadsheet. And then you can always add additional columns here if there are additional columns that are helpful, or if there are columns you don't want, you can take them out. But my thought is, for the most part, you can leave this because it's probably pretty good, pretty thorough. The default's pretty good. So I'm just going to click configure filters and start to define what I want in this sheet. So my last sheet that I uploaded was for athletics. So maybe in this spreadsheet, I want to start like my elementary budget. So I'm going to select some properties from over here on the left that I want to filter on. And this, if you have worked with reports, this look is going to seem familiar. If you haven't worked with reports much, like Jake said, we have that reports training next week. So you might feel a little bit more comfortable with this view after next week. Or if you need a refresher, feel free to join the training that we have posted for next Tuesday. So I'm going to pick that I would like to filter on fund, OPU, and object. And I'm just double clicking on these ones that I want to select, or I can actually drag and drop as well. And then I'm going to start to define my filters. So I want my fund to equal 001, and my OPU for my elementary is 004. And maybe I don't want them to worry about some objects like salary and benefits because I budget that myself. So I want to just do objects greater than or equal to 400. So I am basically telling the system what accounts I want to pull into this sheet. Once I think I have everything filtered the way I would like, I'm going to give it a name up here at the top. And then I'm going to save my sheet. It's going to pop up and say, okay, this is going to start creating a budgeting sheet. It might take a couple minutes. You can go work in another browser tab if it does take a while. Depending on what you're pulling in, if you've filtered down to just like a building, it's probably not going to take super long. But then I get a successful message, and I see behind me that I now have an elementary spreadsheet in my budgeting scenario. If I wanted to look at that, I can click my edit button, or I can download to see it in a spreadsheet. Either way works, just with whichever you're more comfortable with. And then you can see the results of what was included based on the filters that I entered. So here are my account descriptions. This ID is like a unique ID from the back end of the system that you don't really need to worry about, but you can just let it be there in your spreadsheet. And it's just the unique ID for this account. But so you can see all of the accounts that I included based on my filters that I entered. You can see all of those dollar amount columns that pulled in. And you could come over here to my proposed amount column and start filling in proposed amounts. So one thing to point out is that at this point in time, this spreadsheet, when I created this sheet from right here in the budgeting scenario, it filled in PA-2022 for me because it's assuming that I'm in FY21 right now, so I'm most likely working on my next year proposed for FY22. If I were not, if that were wrong, if I were working on current year budget adjustments, I would have to change that. But that is correct for me at this point in time. So you can, again, key in amounts for these accounts. You can write a formula. See what one we maybe want to pick. I know that one's negative, but, and what did we say? A 2% increase. If you wanted to do a 2% increase across the board, you could do that. We'll just clean this one up since it was negative. Whatever you decide with your amounts, if you're doing it from Excel, we're going to go save that. So here's my elementary Excel workbook. X out of that, and then I would go back in and upload my updates over the existing sheet, which did not contain those proposed amounts that I plugged in with a formula. So we are going to go choose that elementary updated spreadsheet. So again, if you don't like downloading and saving into Excel and then uploading, alternatively, you could have come into the edit option. I double clicked there and messed that up, sorry. But you could come into this view and edit directly in here instead of doing it in Excel. It just depends how you're more comfortable. So I could have just as easily typed my amounts in here or entered my formula here, just the same, and then clicked accept with whatever my changes are. So let's go ahead and create a revenue example. So the one we imported that we uploaded originally for athletics was a budget account spreadsheet. And then the one that we just created for the elementary was also budget account. If I want to create proposed amounts for my revenues, I'm going to come in here and select revenue instead. This screen's going to update, and it's going to now show me my available revenue properties and my selected revenue properties that are already going to be in this sheet for me. And I can go ahead and go to the Configure Filters tab unless I want to change a column that's going to be in my spreadsheet. And then I can expand my account code and, select these properties by double clicking or dragging and dropping to start, one of my revenue sheets. So let's do one for food service. Put my sheet name up here at the top and click save. That's giving me the warning that it's going to create a sheet. So I click create. It thinks for a minute, tells me it's done. And then I have that food service revenue sheet here that I could download, make changes, upload, or I could click edit to see it here in this format and make changes here. So we'll just go ahead and plug in some numbers. And click accept. So the numbers that I'm plugging in, again, you may know what you want them to be, or you can use formulas to base them off of figures that are displayed here for you. But these are your proposed amounts. So this is my proposed receivable amount for food service for each of those accounts. Accept my changes. So the two buttons in this that we haven't talked about yet, we have the delete button. So if we have a sheet that, was completely a mistake, we don't need it anymore. Maybe you are cloning your scenario from last year and you closed a building that you had last year. You're not going to have it next year. So you want to delete that sheet. You just click the X and it's gone. This little regenerate option is going to take me back into that select properties area and configure filters area for me to make changes. And if I make any changes here, even if I don't make any changes, if I click save, this is creating a new sheet. So since I regenerated an existing sheet, it created a new sheet right over the existing sheet. If I go look at that now, all those proposed amounts that I keyed in before are gone because I regenerated that sheet from scratch. So if you were cloning a prior scenario, that would make sense that you would probably want to regenerate and update new amounts. But I just want you to be careful about that button. If you've spent time to come in here and key in proposed amounts, that regenerate's gonna restart that sheet from scratch. So far, are we okay? Does anybody want me to show another create or another upload? And this is where I want you to definitely remember to save. We saved this budgeting scenario at the beginning, I did, but now we've added all of these different sheets to our scenario. So we want to make sure that we save all of those different sheets that we've created. Then when I return to my grid, I see I have that new FY22, my second FY22 budgeting scenario. So I have another FY22 budgeting scenario out here. And one thing to point out is that you will only probably promote a single scenario. One scenario should contain everything for your district, all of your different buildings, your budgets, and your revenues. You don't want to have a ton of individual scenarios. You would rather have just one scenario with all of those different sheets in it. Because when I promote my desired scenario to the proposed amounts grid, it's going to wipe out anything that currently exists in my proposed amounts grid for the fiscal year 2022. So if you had created multiple scenarios for each building, you would promote one building and then you would promote the second building, and the second building would overwrite the first building. So hopefully that makes sense. I have two FY22 scenarios here, and it's really just showing you that you can have alternate scenarios, like scenario A and scenario B. If my levy passes, if my levy fails, they're not individual scenarios for each building, because each building and department should be sheets inside the scenario. It just works a little better that way. So once I am finished with my scenario, you've seen me view my scenario, which, then I can edit or clone, and editing jumps you right back into where we were creating and uploading sheets. And if I didn't want one of these scenarios, I would just click delete and it would be gone. but the only other button here is to promote the scenario. So let's go ahead and say I'm done with my scenario for my FY22 next year proposed. So I'm going to promote this to the proposed amount grid. So it's warning you right here, promotion will replace any existing proposed amounts for the fiscal year related to this scenario. So this scenario is FY22. So I don't have anything else out there that I've promoted, so I'm not worried about that. But if you had promoted anything else already for this fiscal year, this is just warning you about that. Another thing that I should point out, if I cancel out of this for a second, is that this 2022 that's displaying over here in the grid in the fiscal year column, that's coming from what you typed in here in this fiscal year box. That's really just for reference. It's going to promote into the fiscal year that is in your header in each file. So these headers are very important. So if you are starting from that report manager budget worksheet or revenue worksheet, you just want to make sure you have PA-2022 if you're working on FY22 next year proposed, because this is actually, this header is determining what fiscal year these amounts are going into. So all of those headers, you know, need to be correct in order for you to apply these to the correct fiscal year. So that's like my caution there. It's not driven based on what you type in that other field. It's really driven based on this header. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of here. All of my headers are FY22, and I'm going to promote and replace anything else that is in my proposed amounts grid by clicking this button. And I get a successful message, and then I can go to budgeting, proposed amounts, and see all of the information in my proposed budget tab and my proposed revenue tab. I have two tabs at the top that split those accounts out accordingly. I have a drop down here at the top of each of those grids to select which fiscal year of proposed budgets I want to see, because I can see old information out there. But let's go ahead and filter and look at FY22. And these are those amounts that were in my spreadsheets. So there's my one I had filtered on an OPU of 004 for my elementary. And down here at the bottom, I have my athletic funds. If I scroll over here to the right, I'm seeing those proposed amounts that I keyed in or that were based on formulas. If I go look at my anticipated revenue tab and pick FY22, I see my food service revenues that I proposed in the spreadsheet in my scenario. So you can make changes here. You have a view button, which just shows you, a different way to look at that information that's in the grid. You can edit and change an amount here. If you, promote from your scenario early and then you need to make a couple adjustments later before you actually apply this as your official next year budget. So you can also add additional accounts here. You can delete accounts from here. If we want to add an account that possibly was not included in our previous spreadsheet, we've reviewed this list and said, oh, we didn't include one of the accounts that I need to. You can come in here and start looking for that account. Enter which fiscal year in this grid it should display within, and enter an amount. And then that will populate here on that grid. I picked one with a different OPU 019. So you can add accounts to here. You can delete accounts if accounts pulled in that, oops, we're not gonna have that specific account this year. That account will still exist in your core accounts. It's just not part of your proposed budget any longer. So if you make any changes here, you want to be careful if you ever go back to budgeting scenarios, because if you were to promote again, it's going to wipe out everything that you've done here. But once you get your information here the way you want it, we can go look at one of these accounts. So if we go find one of these accounts in core accounts, we'll see this next year proposed amount sitting on it. So I'm going to go to core accounts and click expenditure, just so you can see once your information is in the proposed amounts grid. If you were to view that account, you would see this next year proposed amount displaying in core accounts at this point. So once you have everything here the way that you want it, you would, if you're ready to apply your next year proposed as actually your initial budget, when that time comes, you're going to select your fiscal year and you're going to click this apply button. And whenever you apply, it's going to apply everything. So it's going to apply everything that's in this grid, displaying in this grid, and everything that's displaying on the revenue grid all at once. You know, even if you select, you can't get to just apply that one because it's applying all. So when I'm completely finished with everything, I'm going to apply. And you get a pop-up box that asks you some questions. Are you applying these amounts as temporary or permanent, or are they adjustments? So we'll look at the adjustments in a little bit. If you would like to see how to adjust current year amounts through the budgeting scenarios option. But if you're doing your initial budget for FY22, at this point, is it temporary or is it permanent? So, and then there's a question, do you want to update the GAAP original amounts at the same time? Check if yes, uncheck if no. If you are applying temporary or permanent amounts, then the effective date is not available. It's going to be effective July 1st of the applicable year. But if we were doing adjustments to the current year, there is an effective date. So that's what the effective date really is for. It's for those adjustments. It's just displaying on your temporary or permanent options. So there's also a checkbox full year. So you can check to say this budget applies to the full year, or you can uncheck if you're only posting a partial year budget. But once you're ready, you can apply those amounts. So I did temporaries for the full year. And I got an informational message, posting period July 2021 of FY22 was created as a result of this process. If I were to go to core posting periods at this point and make July current, then I just want to show you one of those accounts that it now has that amount sitting on it. So once you roll into that new year, you now have your GAAP original budget and initial budget and everything sitting here ready for you. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into March. Any questions right there on that I showed you? Creating your budgeting scenarios for next year proposed, promoting them to the proposed amounts grid, and applying them to your accounts. So the other option that we mentioned back here in the manual, back in the useful procedures section of the appendix, that other scenario that's out here is if you need to make budget adjustments in the current fiscal year, if you would like to use the budgeting scenario option for that. So it's gonna seem pretty much the same. If you went into budgeting scenarios and wanted to create a new scenario, I'm back in FY21. I just temporarily went into FY22 to show you that amount on the account. FY21 adjustments. So this is 2021. That's probably overkill on a save. Sorry about that. And then I'm going to create, and I can create from here just like I did before, or I can upload from an existing spreadsheet if I have a spreadsheet out there ready with my adjustment information. You also can enter budgeting adjustments directly in core accounts, but this would be if you would prefer to do it through budgeting scenarios to maybe update a lot of accounts a little more quickly. So let's go ahead and make some changes to those athletic amounts that we updated. Then if I go take a look at my budgeting sheet, either through the editing option or you can download it into Excel, make changes, save, and then upload it back in. If I look at this, what pulled in here, so I see prior year information and I see current fiscal year to date expendable. Well, I guess, yeah, I said let's look at the athletic accounts that we updated, but we did an FY22 budget, so we're just still looking at the same accounts, but not the same numbers. Okay, so right now by default, this header is FY22. It's thinking at this point in time, we are working on next year's proposed amounts. But if we are instead creating a sheet for current year adjustments, we have to change that header to be proposed amount 2021. And then what proposed amount should you be entering here? You're not entering an amount that represents the adjustment you want to make. You're representing what you want the expendable or receivable to be. So I can see right now what my expendable amount is on each of these budget accounts. And I can enter what I want them to be. So let's do one going down. I think I increased most of those by $500 and decreased one by $500. So I will go ahead and accept. And you could create another sheet if you had more adjustments to make. You know, for instance, if you wanted to adjust revenue accounts at the same time, you know, you could create that sheet for that as well. But I'm going to go ahead and save what I have now and find my FY21 adjustment scenario. that I was just creating, and I'm going to promote this. It's going to overwrite anything else that's in my proposed amounts for FY21. So am I really sure about that? This is, limited. It contains limited accounts. Do I need anything else from that proposed amount grid before I do this? If so, go take care of that first. So budgeting, proposed amounts. And if I look at FY21, I now only see those athletic accounts with those proposed amounts that I keyed. And if I apply this, again, before I apply this, I have the same options that we talked about before. I can edit, I can, to change the amount, edit. I can delete one of these if, whoops, I didn't really want to make an adjustment to this one account. I could delete that from my proposed grid. So any changes you need to make, you can create to add another one here. But when I apply, what it's going to do is go out and change the expendable amount on the accounts to be these expendable amounts by posting adjustments as needed. So it's going to post additions for $500 on 3 of these accounts and a deduction for $500 on the other. It's going to do those calculations for you. So let's go ahead and apply, and then we'll go take a look at those accounts and show you those adjustments that are going to be a result of this. I'm going to select that these are adjustments. It's going to ask me the effective date. So I am in March, so I'm going to do it, as of the 1st of this month. That date's up to you, but just keep in mind that these adjustments are going to be dated that date. So this money is not going to be available until on and after that date. So let's go ahead and click apply. And then we will go take a look at some of these athletic accounts under core accounts to see the current year adjustments that we just posted. So if I view the account, I can see the details of the account, what the original was, what the expendable is now, that there was $500 added to this account. I can also click budgeting adjustments at the top to make additional budgeting adjustments, or to see that here's that March 1st adjustment that was created from my proposed amounts. And let's see, those would all have the $500, but this last one, instead of a $500 addition, it's a negative adjustment. So you can see that was dated March 1st from proposed amounts. So I know you're probably working on next year proposed coming up here very soon, but we also wanted to let you know that you can update current year budgets as well through the budgeting scenarios and proposed amounts options. And the key to that is getting your header to be the right fiscal year, and then not thinking about the adjustment amount that you want to make. You're thinking about what you want that expendable or receivable amount to be if you're doing adjustments. But that's the same kind of for next year proposed. You want to make sure your fiscal year is right in that header, and you want to enter your receivable or expendable amount, what you want it to be. So questions from anybody? Back in budgeting scenarios, I did show you guys, if you viewed a prior scenario, where the clone button was, right? because I do think that will be helpful if you have a scenario out there from that you used at this time last year. If you just want to clone it and get all of your spreadsheets with all of those filters pulled in as a starting point, just make sure that you know the clone button is there. You have all of those reports in the report manager that are available to you. And we added more to our report manager during this process, during this demo today. But you have, you know, your appropriation worksheet, budget worksheet, you have all of those. You have that other one that we mentioned, like some sort of cash receivable report, something that's, I forget the name of it, but it's in the PowerPoint. The other reports that may be helpful are out here in the public shared reports library, which if I click that link, those were a budget transaction initial estimate and a revenue transaction initial estimate that you might like using during this process that we pointed out. There's a couple others that have been added out here as well that you might want to take a look at. You can always, in the shared report library, if you haven't used it very much, you can, in this example column, the click here button gives you an example of what this report would look like with, you know, data from a demo district, so you can see what information it would be showing you. And if you would like to see that in your files with your district data, you would click this link, which is a JSON file, and it would then need to be downloaded into your downloads and then imported into your report manager grid like we did earlier at the beginning of the demo with the reports from the manual. So the public shared reports library may be helpful, so keep that in mind. And then the other reports that you may use coming up, you know, your appropriation resolution report, certification reports, 5-year forecast, or spending plan. Those may be helpful coming up soon too. So hopefully we covered all these items, and hopefully you would now know how to create a budgeting scenario, preferably one scenario containing multiple sheets, you know, for the different buildings and departments. We showed you how to upload a spreadsheet into the scenario, how to clone a scenario, how to promote the scenario. We looked at both initial budgets and adjustments for the current year. So any questions about any of that? Or anybody who's still on the call, any other questions that have come to mind that you'd like to ask us or another district before we end the meeting for the day? Okay, well, I thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you to the redesign districts and to the non-redesign districts for hanging around for that demo. Hopefully it will be helpful to you as you work on that this year, or that as you use it soon over the next few years. So thank you, everybody, and have a nice day.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.